born into the context of culture. And what that means is we're born into an internal bubble that informs us on how to perform in the world. And then later on, we learn that this internal bubble isn't the only sphere of knowledge that exists. We learn to burst ourselves out of our unique indigenous bubbles, borrowing from other corners of the world, creating uniquely synthesized and eclectic versions of who we are. But in this hybridity, what scholar Homi Bhabha calls, we are interlacing with the very question of how culture plays into power. Because since you come from an oriented singular place and everything else therefore interacts with you by virtue of your influence with it, that very thing which you are drawn by has its own unique origin place. And people who come authentically and originally from that particular place will tend to understand something more naturally than you. What am I trying to explain? I'm trying to explain this unique dynamic of how culture and power plays itself out in the way that we interact with each other. How borrowing and taking and stealing from somebody else implies that we're taking something that's more natural to them, and therefore we can't manifest it in the very same way that they can. But what we can do is find a way to make room for it in the unique synthesis of what we are becoming. This is something I think a lot of people aren't very cognizant of as they develop, just as people. And I think in the playing of rap, in the exploring of the dimensions of what to talk about, rap about conceptually, sometimes we're stuck in this place where we're still rapping about other people's stories, other people's messages, and other people's cultures. Why am I rambling about this? You're watching The Headspace. My name is Viwe, the brother from the ancient mother, and for today's album review, I'm talking about an EP from a uniquely talented battle rapper from Botswana by the name of El the Street Poet, who has created an EP called the Grandmaster EP Volume 1. And everything I said prior ties into this because the Grandmaster EP is basically a flagrant appropriation of Asian culture with Chinese and Japanese tropes. It basically brandishes itself off of the typical Chinese kung fu martial arts graphic novel, pop culture laden ideas of what Asian people are. This hoo-ha kung pao idea that we have of Asian martial arts, and as a result of the path of the warrior, and an idea that has been famously explored and I think embraced by many black people just because of the parallels of ancient Asian culture with the advent of colonialism, and how, you know, at some point Chinese and Japanese people were some of the very few leading people on television and in popular culture who emerged as heroes in the face of Western culture. And people like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan were able to be alternative ideas of what a hero looks like. Heroes of color. Heroes who are, in that sense, more akin to the struggle of what it's like to be oppressed. So I think it's quite natural in the way that many black folk gravitate to Asian culture. It's because of this commonality of being oppressed by this mutual enemy of the West, and seeing how the culture of Chinese and Japanese people, albeit their own personal differences, has influenced the rest of the oppressed world. Now, when we flash into how this has historically been appropriated by black people, it stems everywhere from manga to anime to the culture of martial arts, and to the very movies that were popularized by that. We're talking about groups most famously like the Wu-Tang Clan, and many a song in an underground hip-hop rapper's repertoire which used the metaphor of martial arts as some kind of message of kicking lyrical ass, from using the tongue as a sword to using the mic as a fist. This whole idea of rappers being ancient samurais or ancient Asiatically placed archetypal warriors isn't new. So hearing El the Street Poet kind of pull out this very old bag of Asian influenced cultural tropes and kind of playing them out in a way which doesn't feel uniquely new. And all he really does is kind of just focus on the very same ideas we have about this kind of idealist, oriental, disciplined, guardian, hero of the light, is an injustice, I think, to how deep you could possibly go with that. The example I made of the Wu-Tang Clan is one primal example, how Wu-Tang, solely just from the flick itself and this whole inspiration of being a martial artist in the rap context, took that concept with great insight and expanded it until it became something uniquely theirs. From renaming Staten Island Shaolin to creating very powerfully poignant parallels between the streets of the ghetto and this ancient dynamic of the warrior's path, was something that the Wu-Tang Clan helped us understand in a way of how appropriation can be done with reverence and with respect. And I think the irony is, since the code of the Bushido and all that other kak is always alluding to respect and honor, it's funny how rappers always appropriate this culture without that respect and honor. I think it's also a flashback to Jay Seth's project earlier on last year that we reviewed, which takes a leaf out of that same book. I'm fascinated by black people who love martial arts and Asian culture so much that they're still willing to use it as a dominant metaphor in their music. But I think it has to at some point orientate itself with who you are as an African, as somebody from Botswana. And I think in the case of El the Street Poet, the one thing that I can say in his respect is the lofty, intimate recital style delivery, his formalism, his broad, neatly tucked in voice, his clarity is something that stands out. He's able to experiment with his vocal range and as well on tracks like 100 Styles, where I think the point was to be a little bit more animated and paint out an illustrative picture of a world at war with itself. And I think throughout these 7 tracks, there aren't any more other than 100 Styles which really do anything to shine a light on the actual individual, his rapping skill, let alone his direct locale of being a battle rapper from Botswana. I think there is a dissonance, there is a disconnect in how he takes this concept and he brings it home. I don't think he does. I think this is just merely him stretching out his own unique creative capabilities and playing with the idea. But I think he does it in a way that is not conscious of the political implications of how this can really come across as distasteful, disrespectful appropriation. Just a black dude being inspired by ideas and caricatures of a culture, but not really the culture in and of itself. It's like if you've ever actually met a Japanese and a Chinese person, they're not really the caricature you know from a martial arts movie. They're subtle. There's a whole lot of different ideas that have not been explored by the movies in and of themselves. So I think, I don't know, other than playing into the same themes of this idealistic, mythical idea of the disciplined Asian warrior, I don't know how that pushes us forward in a way that we could learn anything new. But I will give him merits for just being really good with his pockets and for keeping his cadences in places where they're always clean cut but interesting to listen to. You can tell this is somebody who just enjoys the art of piecing words together, and I always love listening to rappers enjoy what they do. So I think ultimately for me, this is a 3.5 to 4 out of 10, simply because he doesn't take the concept of Grandmaster and make it relevant to him in any real way. This is so much of a trope that he kind of stands distant from it, and he uses it as a theme, but he doesn't bring it to becoming what he is and to somehow illustrating how it actually even has anything to do with who he is. I mean, we kind of guessed it's just from chopping MCs up, you're the Grandmaster, but come on, give us life, give us imagery, show us how that's real, especially coming from Africa, coming from Botswana, coming from the climate you're from, coming from the unique space of battle rap and kind of trying to bridge it into recorded rap. Also, that difference, you know, how does it feel? What are you trying to do? You get none of that. So as a result, I feel like this is a project that is alienated from the artist in and of themselves, and is like a floating appropriation. But ultimately, peace to hip-hop, peace to African hip-hop. My name is Viwe, the brother from the ancient mother. We have no other way other than to be influenced by each other. But as we rub off on each other, it's important to understand the unique hues and colors that are kind of being embedded into us, so that we just don't become carbon copies of one another. So we understand how we can accentuate each other in ways that are beautifully like complementary features that emphasize themselves in their differences as they do in their similarities. But other than that, it's all culture, it's all love. Peace.